White text over video of past events. Logo, Chicago Cultural Accessibility Consortium. Professional Development Series presents Welcoming Veterans. At the front of a room, seated at a table are 5 people. To the right, a screen with projected captions. To the left, a woman stands and addresses the audience.
For today's session, we are going to focus on our veterans' experiences when visiting cultural organizations, museums, zoos, theaters, arboretums, all those places. We are not here to talk about their experiences when they were serving for our country, so we're going to just avoid all of those questions completely and focus on what we could be doing better for our veterans at our various cultural organizations. Panel members, I think I've already mentioned this to you, but I just want to remind you, we do want to hear both positive experiences you've had, and if you happen to have negative experiences at cultural organizations, please feel free to share. I think that will help us learn. We just ask when you're speaking about any negative experiences that you not mention the organization's name. But if you have positive feedback to share, go ahead and share their name. Finally, we're going to remind everybody in the audience, if you do have a question, please wait until the microphone gets to you. All of us will be using mics today. All right, we are going to get started, and I'm going to ask the panel to introduce themselves. They know they each have 1 minute to do a brief introduction, and we all will be sharing the microphone, so if you don't mind, so pass them up through that. Mark, I'm going to ask if you would be big, please.
Hello, my name is Martin Davis. I'm both 18, but I'm 27. I'm an Army veteran of 5 years. I just got out in 2017, and still kind of learning and adapting as I go.
Hello, my name is Zachary. I just medically retired from the Marine Corps for 14 years, and now here in the city going to art school.
My name is Connie Karras, and first, thank you, Lynn, and the CCAC and Peggy Mopart for hosting us for this opportunity. I am a Marine Corps veteran. I live in Northwest Indiana. I also volunteer at the beautiful Shedd Aquarium in the horticulture and co-location departments, and I'm just pleased to be here.
Stereo. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ned Ricks. I'm an Army guy, 25 years worth, and I was involved in the Vietnam War, in some ways more than others. Currently, I'm a volunteer at the National Veterans Art Museum in Portage Park, which I encourage any and all of you to go see their wonderful exhibits. And thank you for coming, and thank you for asking.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Valerie Watson. I'm a United States Air Force veteran. Currently, what I do a lot of volunteer work with children. I tutor for CPS schools for children in reading and children that are underprivileged and everything like that. And I do engage in a lot of corporate, civic activities like the museums and Shedd Aquarius. And I'm proud to be here and give any input to anyone that needs it. Thank you so much for inviting us.
All right, we're going to jump right in with an easy one. And Martin, I'm going to throw it to you again. Martin, I might keep throwing things to Martin because Martin and I have worked together before on panels. We've held a couple panels at Shedd Aquarium, so he's been my go-to guy. But you're all here, you're all going to get to talk. But Martin, do you want to start? What's your favorite cultural organization and why?
So my favorite cultural attraction is the Theater Museum of Chicago. Has been since I was a kid, especially now as a veteran. No matter how crowded it is, you can always find like a quiet place to just kind of be yourself and just be by yourself. It's kind of like a state of mind for me being there because it's just very zen. It's very quiet. And, you can always find a place that's not crowded, away from people, and you can always find something new there as well.
I'm biased since I go to school at the Art Institute of Chicago. That is my favorite cultural place. But I also very much like the cultural center down by Millennium Park. I think it's just the cultural center of Chicago or something. But I like that because it has, well, one, I like the museum because it's a museum and for the most part it's quiet. And in the same respects, I can go and find new things or just find quiet places. But the cultural center I think is great because it has small exhibitions from small places around the city. And I think those small exhibitions still have a very large impact on what they show and the way they present it.
Anytime someone asks me what my favorite anything is, that never elicits one answer. Because I have a lot of favorites, but I won't bore everyone going into all of them. I do have to say, though, that I want to share that one of my favorite places to be is the Indiana Dunes National Lake Shore. The Paul H. Douglas Nature Center is just beautiful. And the Indiana Dunes Living Center in Porter, Indiana, are some of my favorite places. I can commune with nature and get away from the rat race there. But I do have to put a wonderful plug in for the Shedd Aquarium, where I'm also a volunteer. There's a near and dear place in my heart with the Shedd, and I want to mention, speaking of veterans, I was blessed to be a part of a wonderful program, a Veterans and Gold Star Mother Garden. Has anybody here seen the garden over at the Shedd? It's not in full bloom now, of course, but it's on the North Lawn, and it was dedicated to veterans and Gold Star mothers and women. So I was blessed to be a part of that. And thank you, Shedd Aquarium, for doing that for us. Very, very, very much appreciated.
Favorite places I've had to, is it on? Yes. You can hear me? Yes, we're good. I hate to do that. Is this thing working? If it's on a gooseneck, you can always make noise just by moving. Favorite places, I had to winnow it down to 4 tablets worth of things. I'm assuming that the Cubs are not considered culturally.
It's okay, I
Oh, okay. Of course, I already gave a plug for NVAM, National Veterans Art Museum, very dear to my heart. Like several other panel members, really get into the Art Institute of Chicago. I frequently find it overwhelming. There's so many wonderful things in there at any given time that I have to ration myself to only go see a certain number of exhibits and take them slowly and let it absorb and go away and come back another time. And like my compatriots here, you can find a quiet spot, which I'm sensing a theme, quiet spots. I also like to go with my wife and sometimes my adult kids to Ravinia. That can be a wonderful, soothing place on a summer's evening. And in the last 4 or 5 years, the Humanities Festival here in Chicago has just some world-class, compelling things that I have to get involved in. So I guess I'll stop with the first tablet and let Valerie have a shot.
Okay, one of my favorite cultural experiences is Steppenwolf Theater. They often have, every 3 months or so, they have what they call Veteran Nights. So, and they invite veterans from all different organizations, which I'm affiliated with Volunteers of America. I'm a resident of one of their building programs too, and also with National Women Veterans United. This is a national organization that was born and bred by female veterans, and we're now nationwide, so I'm very proud of that. But I love the Shedd Aquarium or their Veterans Nights because they give veterans an opportunity to make us feel like, hey, we haven't lost our calling. We get to see plays and different stuff before the regular public goes, and they got paintings about it and what they think, and they tweak it according to whatever we say. So it kind of makes us feel proud to know that we're part of that, and I really enjoy that, and I thank them so much for their living experiences.
Now, I'm going to stick with you. What are some barriers that you've come across when visiting any kind of cultural organizations?
Well, actually, varies that I've personally experienced, probably as many people probably have. As of recent years, my physical health has kind of deteriorated. I used to be a very active person, so now I've had knee replacements and bad hips and stuff like that. So one of the biggest things that I kind of really found aggravating or frustrating to me when I go out culturally to events, if things are not accessible to persons with disabilities or something like that. And but fortunately, I haven't experienced it too much. I'm the type of person that I see something or something needs to be fixed, I bring it up, and they usually try to cooperate. And
So what resources or accommodations are important to you then?
particularly ramps, because stairs are hard for a lot of people with disabilities. So if you have ramp access, even if you don't have wheelchairs or whatever, a person with a disability or whatever, they may be able to still maneuver without, any assistance if they have an incline rather than trying to do stairs or something like that. And as far as long distance, most cultural places, I think will help us veterans if they were able to have transport available for people, not only just veterans, but any person with a disability. Say you're in the parking lot, you're coming into most places have disability parking. So you also should have, I think it would be good to incorporate to have where if you need transportation or transport to the event or whatever, that should be accessible to, especially our veterans, because we have so many of us have so many, ailments and disabilities that the normal population doesn't experience, and we like to be a part of the culture and everything, so that would help us tremendously if we're able to actually get into a venue without any problems.
Thanks. Zachary, I'm going to bounce it to you. Same question. Can you talk about some barriers that you've encountered that prevent you from having the best experience you've had?
I thought I had 2 people almost.
Bounce around.
No, so I had some issues. So I did have a service animal. So I medically retired for traumatic brain injuries and some other stuff. And that set off a lot of migraines. And so I did have a service animal to sniff out my migraines and have me take a pill before symptoms set on. But I had a very negative experience at the post office. And it made me not want to have a service animal at all anymore, to not have that experience anywhere else. But I reached out to a lot of my friends who also are medically retired and young injured individuals like myself. And so speaking on behalf of a lot of people with amputations and service animals and other injuries. So one thing that is a common trend of a barrier is the searching of service animals. Like the vest and things has happened before, which puts the handler on, not really like alert, but it's just a disturbing thing to have that. And also friends with like braces and prosthetic legs, like having, no joke, in museums or theaters and places where there is a heightened security metal detectors, like actually having them take off their body parts, which is not okay, and obviously disturbs them from going anywhere else. Another barrier is I have hearing loss as well. I received hearing aids when I was 27 years old, and so in a very noisy environment, I can't hear anything at all. And the hearing aids don't help with that because they amplify noise, they don't filter out what you don't want to hear. And so a lot of times I'm sure you've heard, veterans don't go to malls and stuff because it's crowded and busy and loud and stuff. And that's all true, but a theater, a museum, an aquarium, all these places have just the same noise aspect. And when I have 4 young boys, and so when I can't hear anything, it's not good because I can't hear them at all either. And so I'm limited to where I can go with my kids until someone else can go with me to help me make sure I can listen to my children and literally hear what they're saying. Because when it's so loud, it's not only that it's so loud, it's uncomfortable, it's, I can't be a father to my kids because I literally can't hear them.
So is there anything we can do to help with that?
I don't know, so some things that I had thought of and talked to other panelists before it started was like better areas that are maybe like more confined, but will filter out having a lot of people in those areas, because my kid's trying to tell me something, I need to go somewhere to hear him, you know, I say him because I have full voice, but I don't know if I know the answer to that. I'm just telling you what the issue for me is. And a lot of times with the younger generation in the wars, there is a huge population of young people with hearing aids now and hearing damage, whereas, you know, in previous wars there was hearing damage and things, but it wasn't as known and it wasn't as sought after for care and giving care. You know, like so readily pumping kids hearing aids. I actually turned out my first hearing aid when I was 26. When I was 28, they said it was not an option. And then some other barriers, I guess. I'm drawing a blank. I just have mine but for me personally, it's the overabundance of people, the like mass crowding into things, which I understand. Everyone wants to see certain exhibits and certain things, and then dogs and prosthetics and over searching, I guess.
So we can spend the rest of today talking about service animal issues. We're not going to get into that, but if you're on the CCAC listserv, you'll see that a resource was shared earlier today about an upcoming webinar about service animal scenarios. So I encourage you, if you can, to pay attention to that webinar. I want to continue a question with you, Zach, based on something you said about all the noise, because most of us do work at organizations that are really, really loud, and now with spring break coming, we're getting louder and louder. So I wonder if, or how you feel about the different events that are now being made available, that they're called a variety of things. At SHED, we just started something called Calm Waters for guests with disabilities. And in the past, when we've had panel sessions, the veterans shared with me that they didn't consider themselves people with disabilities, so they might not even look on our accessibility page of the website to find out about such events. So I'm just wondering how you all feel, and would those events be something you'd be interested in?
Yeah, I would absolutely be interested in those type of events, but exactly what you hit on, I wouldn't know to go to the website to search for that. And a lot of people that I know in the same kind of situation wouldn't know that either. I think a possible solution for that would be to push that to just as many veterans organizations, because there's just, I'm only on 2 or 3, maybe 4 email lists for veteran organizations, and so unless you speak to them individually, hear it. But a lot of those veteran organizations do push out information about upcoming events that are welcoming to veterans, and I think that could be absolutely something that could be pushed to the veteran community.
Connie, you were shaking your head a lot while
Yes.
Zachary was speaking, so do you want to pick up that?
Yeah, I'm finished.
Yes, I'd love to piggyback off of this. You bring up a wonderful thing, because I struggle with hearing as well. I didn't pass the hearing test when I was discharged from the Corps. Although I'm functional, it's not, I don't have hearing loss. That's considered very serious. But I do want to say, and this is so important to me, one thing that I noticed at the SHED Aquarium when I went there recently, and I haven't been able to volunteer in quite some time, and I'm not here to just plug the SHED because I'm a volunteer there. I just happen to be there more often than other places because I'm busy. So there may be other institutions doing this Calm Waters type of program as well. And to them, thank you, kudos, whoever's doing that out there. But one thing that really, really made a difference to me, I even turned to my spouse and said, wow, this is wonderful. This is what we need. This is what I desired in these types of institutions, is I walked into the space that used to be amphibians, which is now underwater beauty. And anybody who hasn't seen this, it's beautiful. Please go. So there's your plug. I was really, really moved by the fact that as I was going through the exhibit, which is really beautiful and vivid and educational, so much fun, that's great, but it can be overwhelming, all this noise. At the end, if there is this calm little room. I've never seen anything like this at Shed before, with an aquarium, and just a quiet little sitting room, in a nook, all on its own. And I had a difficult day that day, and I needed some peace and quiet because I have post-traumatic stress and can get quite overwhelmed at times. So I was sitting there in my own thoughts. It was so quiet, peaceful. It transcended even just the relaxing music that was in the exhibit. And it's such a space that's needed so desperately in large institutions like that, large organizations that cater to the public. So, yes, we need more of that, and to get the word out would be great. And I'll help certainly do that myself with family and friends. So thank you to the Shed Aquarium for doing that, and any other organizations who are doing something similar.
So that was something we learned in, Martin, maybe you'll help me remember, it was at the panel you were at, that people shared with us the importance of having those quiet spaces. I think one of us from Shed asked the question because we were starting to work on a dedicated quiet room in Shed, but our dedicated quiet room is removed from all habitats. And Martin, or one of the panel members, shared that yes, they really appreciate those quiet spaces, but they would love to be able to enjoy a quiet space while still enjoying, in our case, animals. So keep that in mind too as you're kind of plotting out quiet places throughout your organizations, that there are people that still want to be able to enjoy the reason why they're at your organization and not be closed away in a quiet room. And quiet rooms do have good purposes, and there are people that need them for what they are, but there are other options too. Ned, let's stick to the same question. Let's talk about some barriers you might have encountered when visiting cultural arts, or the museums.
I find it gratifying that our panel of veterans here covers a spectrum of the people who served our country. I'm kind of the demographic of the really old guy. My service time spanned Vietnam time, Grenada, Panama, Gulf War I. And if you think back, 1990, if you were 20 years old then, you're 50 now. I was before that. But some of these things that build up, and you, if you can remember, please, some of you, I'm sure some of you read it in history books, didn't experience it exactly. The guys in my generation, when we came home, we were not welcome with open arms as our folks are today. In that time, the American public did not do as good a job as separating their feelings about the war from the feelings about the warrior. And so a lot of us buttoned it up, tucked it away, put it in that box room in the attic of the house, and you never talked about it. And so things that were service related, like hearing loss, things like exposure to Agent Orange, symptoms of that, you just didn't talk about it because you didn't want to call attention to the fact that you were a veteran. I think it is a good thing where we've evolved today. But a more direct answer to your question, like all of the folks I've heard thus far, noise is a big deal for me. I also have hearing aids, and they are a wonder compared to being without, but they are not the answer to everything. So, as an example, a room like this that has hard walls, a lot of glass, if we were having, as an example, a reception where you just had a bunch of people sitting around talking, it's Charlie Brown, school teacher in the cartoon movie. Wow, 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 wow. I can't hear any of them. So when we go to places like that, my tendency is I'll find a corner, I'll find a wall, I'll find some place where I can smile and nod and not have to try to pick out through the babble of what's going on. We were joking earlier about, are the Cubs considered a cultural event? I'm fortunate that I have a good friend that will go with me to the Cubs games. And another thing that really, part of it, maybe because I'm a small-sized guy, crowds really up the anxiety level for me. Now, I love being at Wrigley Field with 39,000 other screaming fans, but in the concourse, people, you know, you're sardinish moving along. That will up the anxiety level. What can you do about that? Well, you can get me, you know, sweet tickets. As far as the noise level, there are some things that come to mind. As an example, do we have to have background music everywhere? I think of when I want to have dinner out with my adult kids, who are some of the most wonderful people I know. Thank God they had a mother. But it's always at a restaurant, and there always has to be music. Now, the crowd noise is bad enough, you know, and the clinking the plates, and, you know, order up, and all this stuff going on in the background, but then you also have that really? Why can't we have more quiet places where people can hear each other? We can hear each other talk. It might be one reason why I really like Gardens. It tends to be a quiet place. And along with what you were talking about, accessibility. Now, I don't have a handicap tag. I've avoided getting that. But finding a place to park. Now, I live in the suburbs, so you'll hear suburban talk coming out, especially when you come to the city. I mean, my goodness, where? And then you're around and around. Now, can I have an amen from the choir? How about punctuality, OCD? Did you suffer from that? Okay, I'm supposed to be here at 2:30. It's 2:20. Am I going to find a place to park? Oh my God! Okay, so I'm blaming it all out. My therapist should give me a refund for and the last one I'll kick in, having to do with the old guys. Line of sight. Now, in this case, I wish, Lynn, I had line of sight for this, so I would know what other people were saying for sure. But I'm fortunately sitting right next to them, so I get it. And there are guys at my vintage that now I'm speaking for them, reflecting them as they are here. But fireworks, I would kind of like to know in advance if there's going to be fireworks. Sometimes you'll see, if you go to Disney, you know, crowds and noise, oh God. But you'll go into an event and they'll say there's going to be flashing lights and smoke, right? Have you seen those pre-notices? I appreciate that, because when it catches you off guard, the blood pressure goes right up and fight or flight kicks in. And my flak jacket is out to the cleaner, so I don't have it available.
Martin, you were nodding your head during a lot of what Ned was saying. Do you want to add?
Yeah, everyone had really great points, and I think what we often forget that veterans often come with family. You know, and I don't want to punish my wife because I want to take a break and I need to pause from what we're doing for the day. And as we talked about the shed panel, there was labeled quiet spaces at the shed, and they were, you know, as we jokingly said, like, there was nothing there. there's you know, I'm fine with that, but I don't want to punish the people that I'm with because I need the break. So if I can, like, pause, if there's an exhibit here that I can pause, and like you said, the underwater beauty, there was an audible noise difference when I walked in. It went from, you know, the loud screaming next to the dolphins, and then all of a sudden it was just like nothing. And it was like something being lifted from my shoulders. It was very nice to just have that. And I understand that that's incredibly difficult to do in a museum, in a cultural center where you have a lot of people coming in. You have these rushes, but as we talked about the other panel, like if you just have someone there at the front, maybe, you know, just a worker or something, like, hey, you know, this is a quiet space, you know, just make sure you keep the noise volume down or something like that. And as you were saying with parking, like, my wife is my chauffeur, and if like she's stressed because she can't find a space, that translates to me, and then I get aggravated, and I'm sitting there like a squirrel in a burlap sack, just like, okay, like what are we doing? Like, can we find a spot, and we have to park 5 miles down and walk, and that's never a fun experience when there's, rush hour traffic going by. It's,
That brings up a good point. Last weekend, I don't know where I was, but I was out and about, and at some store, they had Pets parking right up in front. It was labeled just like accessible parking is labeled, and that was the first and only time I had seen that.
So what, that part?
Vet parking.
Mariana does that. Mariana.
Today?
I think a lot of people forget that just because you can't see a disability doesn't mean that someone doesn't have it. And like some of the things that we can do, this is something I'm trying to do with my school as well. I'm an English major, is just having these panels and just having veterans come up and just share a story or, talk about their experiences as we're doing right now, going to these places and stuff. I think that is one of the most important things that you can do, because how else are you going to know how to, talk to veterans or interact with them? You hear them speak. And I think these are very important, and I think these are some of the best things that you guys can do. I really appreciate it. And sorry.
Valerie, I want to give you the chance. When you spoke earlier, you touched on the need for places to be accessible, but are there other barriers? You talked about wanting to have ramps and physical access. Is there anything else that's a barrier for you?
Pretty much, those were like the main barrier would be to actually, like I said, get to where you're going. So once you get past that, the rest of the experience, as my other panelists said, they all come into play as well. The quiet space, and be able to get a chance to reboot or regroup in the middle of something, you may be having. It may be something that may trigger something within you, that other people probably won't understand. As Martin said, because you don't see a disability doesn't mean that one doesn't exist, I think a lot of us, from what we've all experienced, we have a high level of anxiety, probably for different things and different reasons that may trigger us. So being able to actually get over a lot of things as far as if say we're going to go to an event and we can get in there and it's no problem getting in there and we know, okay, well, we're going to sit and enjoy this. If I get overwhelmed, I'll be able to go and relax and then come back and enjoy. That's peaceful in my mind to be able to do that as well.
Connie, do you want to pick up? Let's switch over. We touched on the idea of accommodations. Like, what, in your ideal world, what would all of our cultural organizations offer to you so you thoroughly enjoy a visit? If anybody has questions and wants more specifics as we talk about accommodations, Anna's got a microphone, and this is really what we thought the meat of today's conversation would be about, because we want you all to go home with ideas on how you can put some of this stuff into play immediately.
In the perfect world, well, first, I have to qualify everything I'm going to say with a little bit of gratitude in that I am not a person who has a lot of challenges. I'm not a person with a lot of disabilities in comparison to a lot of people, a lot of veterans, a lot of people in general. I am grateful for my health. I have a disability we cannot see, which has made life very difficult, but with the support of loved ones, people who care, I'm better and getting better every day. I'm looking forward to celebrating my birthday this month in a quiet place with people who love me. But that being said, that gratitude for not needing a ramp, not needing Braille, not needing a hearing assistive device yet. I'm so grateful for that. So perhaps I'm not the one to ask about this, but my issues specifically is crowds, loud noise, fireworks, as Ned had. 4th of July, I cower in the basement with our furry kids. I'm not kidding, I need a thunder jacket. It takes all the joy out of the 4th of July, right out of me. So it's frightening. And if I can say one thing just in general about that, people, please stop doing that. It doesn't do any good to set off all those fireworks. It just makes us cower. And it's I'm sure not veterans who have issues with that as well. But in my perfect world, say I was to go to the steps of someplace, I'm trying to imagine what would make a beautiful, perfect experience in an organization, cultural organization, any type of cultural organization. One thing that makes a huge difference to me is the staff. Is there a diverse representation of the staff? And I've been in places that have a lot of accommodations for people with disabilities, but the staff doesn't seem representative of that. And I think we're smart, we're savvy shoppers, and we see the people at the front and in the middle and the back who are representing an institution, a cultural organization, anywhere of any type. If they are not being represented by the people who are going to that organization, something's askew. So one thing that I've noticed, I really would love to see, probably a little bit more in a lot of the very popular organizations we've been going to in the Chicagoland areas, is more diversity in staff. And I'm not going to mention any particular names. I will put a plug in though, however, for the Chicago area. People believe that. Sometimes my spouse works there. So it's actually true that there's representation, possibly perhaps not across the board with respect to all disabilities, but it's more so than I've seen in some other places. So, but the staff, the friendliness, the welcoming, that's another thing that the Shedd Aquarium has done. It's welcoming. I think there was a banner. Anybody see the banner hanging right out the facade in front of the building? We are a welcoming, I'm paraphrasing, I don't know exactly what it said, we are a welcoming institution, we're welcoming. That's huge. That is huge. People of all extractions, ethnicities, sexual orientations, abilities, physical and otherwise, that's huge. And now I'm drawing a blank, I think I've said enough, I'd like to let someone else speak.
Zachary, you want to pick that one up?
Specifically, here we go. So,
Any type of accommodations that all of the different cultural organizations can offer veterans that could really make for a successful, enjoyable experience for you? What would you love to see?
So, a lot of them are too large to be implemented quickly, or thought of and how to address them.
Tell us anyway.
Well, we had talked about, my biggest thing is my hearing, because when you take away my hearing, it takes away my ability to be a father, So I'm not sure what can be implemented to that, but another thing that I've experienced, is with my service animal, which I don't have anymore because of my experience with it. And like you had said about the video on your website, I just think that's important to touch on again about like the education of staff. And I know that I just think it's important, especially at the reception, like you touched on. The reception staff has to be, they just have to be aware of all those situations. I tried to go somewhere, and I'm not going to list it out where it was, I guess we can't do that. But I have a brace on my foot from tearing 3 tendons in my ankle, and I went to a place that had a metal detector, and they wouldn't let me come in unless I took off the brace so they could test the brace. What am I trying to hide in a brace? I understand there's a possibility, but it just, it might deter more than it accepts at that point in time. And I ended up not going to the space and missed that opportunity, which is okay. It's that place's choice to have that barrier in place, but I don't think it was necessary. And then, yeah, to touch on again, the reception staff to like check out prosthetic limbs is completely unacceptable. I guess I like what I hear about I guess I'm talking everyone else is the shed aquariums spot. Their quiet area I think is nice, and I will absolutely utilize that, and just maybe other places could have a small area. And something that would be good is even if I went to the shed aquarium, I wouldn't know that area until I stumbled upon it. So even if it was one of those initial maps or something, where this is where you are, or just something that says like we offer these spaces for this facility is wheelchair compatible. There are signs for elevators. There's quiet spaces dictated here, there, and the other place, because I fully wouldn't expect any place to have those kind of things. It's a new thing, is what I consider. I will touch on though that the music is. I understand that a lot of places have the music to dampen the crowd noise to make it feel more intimate with your party you're there with. But other people with hearing damage, and I'm not going to try to sour it for the 90-95% or whatever it is that doesn't have that specific thing. But so hearing aids, to educate everyone a little bit more, they have a microphone in the back, right? So when I'm here with people, I can hear them because they're loud in my space. But when I'm with a lot of people, all I do is hear everyone behind me and no one in front of me. So that's how they work, and that's why they're so just not applicable in crowds. Because in crowds it just feels like I literally have like a whole movie set 3 feet behind me, because that's where my microphones are. So just to understand how that works, and the silverware, that's so funny because I've never said that to anyone else, but yeah, the silverware, like clinking of silverware, which is not a huge deal, is like a radioactive bomb going on in your hearing aids, because it's such that high pitch, which is the high pitch usually is the first to go. But I think that those spaces and a better trained or more fully trained initial staff would work wonders and be great. Also some signage on accommodations and things for people with disabilities.
Yeah, go ahead.
Another shameless plug for the shed aquarium. They implemented. They actually implemented something that was discussed at the last panel that really helps a lot. They have identifying tags on the employee name tags to let you know, like, okay, this person's a veteran, and that helps a lot, because that's a face that we can be. It doesn't matter if I've never met you before. I know that you're a veteran. Like, hey man, like, is there a place I can grab, or I can be like just a corner to myself? Like, that's a big one, and that's a small change, and that's an easy fix. I mean, that's something that takes just adding a pin or something to your nameplate, and it makes a very large difference. Because
Keep that microphone. I want to make sure people understand that shed is not perfect. We're trying to be, but we're not there yet. Speaking of quiet spaces, when we were talking about different areas at the aquarium that we might be able to designate as such, all of our panel members at the time had visited sheds, so they were aware, and we could talk about specific areas. And the Underwater Beauty exhibit that keeps coming up was a place that I thought at the end that was described would be the perfect quiet area. But Martin, do you remember the panel members, everybody on the panel disagreed? Do you want to share why?
yeah, because if I remember correctly, it was crowded at that moment, and the space was too tight and like winding, which is another huge factor. Because when I went, there was no one there, so the tight space didn't bother me. But when I'm vying for a spot and people are shoving me and like out, like the throwing the elbows and the shoulders, like that's not a fun experience. I mean, for anybody really, but I sometimes feel like a trap dog, and I felt really bad for the other panelists at the time because they went at a time that was very crowded and that tight space is amplified, whereas I could just hold my wife's hand and be fine. As long as there's not too many people there.
And can any of you speak to the idea of being able to see exits and your preference for exits? Because that was something that came up with that space as well.
Mind reading. Last night, my wife and I went to a Muslim mosque out near us, a vigil for the New Zealand massacre. I was pleased and surprised to see clergy from all the major faiths were there. And a room that I think was designed for about 100. I bet you had 350, and people were standing in the aisles. And I turned to my wife and I said, there's an exit there to the outside, that one's to the outside, that one's to the corridor. And she said, okay. And we got in the car we left her late so we wouldn't be stuck in the crowd in the parking lot. And we're driving away, and she said, why did you point out the exits? Did you think there was too many people that the fire marshal wouldn't like it? I said, no, it's a bunch of religious people, and where do all these shootings happen? Religious people. That's a door, that's a door, that's a door. Always keeping my eye, what's the fastest way out? If you needed to shelter in place, what is the least permeable barrier you can get behind? They generally don't let us carry sidearms anymore. So you have to think of that all the time. When I'm driving down the highway, I can still tell you where the ambush sites are coming out. And don't like to get pinned in a lane where there's no way out. I can run over the guardrail if I had to, but don't like to be in the middle lane because there's no options. If I can talk for a second about the pins, identifying. We were on vacation, my hearing aid wife, she's the service dog, seeing eye dog, I have a wife who hears for me and will translate. And we were in a museum, and I noticed several of the people who were working there, both men and women, had veteran badge, and then they'd have a pin that said what service they were and so forth. So I go over and start talking to them. At the end of the allotted time, we were at the museum, we were leaving, she said, oh, did you see the exhibit of such and such? There was an exhibit of such and such? You didn't see it? I said, no, I was busy talking to the veterans. She said, oh, you always do that with your peeps. Whenever you find your peeps, I lose you, because you go over and talk, magic talk.
I think we have a question in the back.
Yep, we'll get right there. Hi, I first want to start off by thanking everyone for sharing their experiences with us this afternoon, so thank you very much. In addition to some of our museum, I'm sorry, can everyone hear me? No? In addition, is that good? Okay. In addition to the Art Institute, I'm sorry.
It's working magic. Say it again.
Hi, are we back?
Yes.
In addition to the art venues and the nature museums that you have attended, I heard earlier mention about Ravinia. I am curious to know, in performance venues or music halls, those type of areas, are there additional accommodations that can make your experiences more pleasant, considering that it is a little bit heavy on noise and on crowd, and if there are intermissions, of course, that's an area that produces more noise and compact spaces. So I'm just curious to know if you frequent those type of facilities, what can those venues do to make your experience more pleasant?
Can you repeat the facilities you're talking about?
Hi, I'll put myself on the spot. I'm Christina from the Joffrey Ballet. So we do have loud acoustics, and we have large house venue, and we also have intermission where bodies crowd, and there's lots of speaking. So I'm curious to know what can we do to be more welcoming as a performance venue and to help mitigate some of the issues that may occur.
Should I do that? Thanks for your question. The good news about going to ballet is you only have to hear the rhythm of the music, and you don't have to hear any words the performers aren't singing. You know, they're doing a wonderful job with the music. Places such as Ravinia, other venues that involve sound. If there was something like this when there were announcements, because at least in my case, I go to Ravinia with my family. I like to be with my family. I know they enjoy it. We try to choose either events that are, say, CSO classical music, where you're not trying to hear the words, or something like Prairie Home Companion, where it is all words, and you get closer to the stage. I had the opportunity to see Gary Sinise and his Lieutenant Dan band. Thank you, Gary, for everyone. I couldn't stay. It was just painful. And I had brought my earplugs, literal rubber earplugs, going into a place like that. So I would say if there's a lot of noise involved, if there is a visual way to communicate things, like the intermission is ending. As far as the crowds in the lobby during the intermission, I stay in my seat, mostly. And at the last minute, when everybody's coming back, then I dash to Mentor, try to get back before they close the house. I don't know if any of those are concrete and hopeful for you.
You brought up one of my favorite people here. Here's Denise, because I was going to, I'm going to plug Steppenwolf. I'm also going to plug this place because when I was coming in the entrance, I came in, probably maybe unconventional from a lot of you that came in. I came in from the back entrance, the security let me in. So when I came through, I was like, I haven't had the pleasure of coming here before. So when I came through, you talk about quiet spaces. There's a space back there in the back where they got the little, it's like a little tunnel. I was like, wow, this is neat. I can hang out here all day long. So who goes to this place? You guys have quiet places, and maybe because maybe the kids weren't all here or nobody had made it back that far yet. But I really, that was a plus for me to see that. And to expand on some of the good things that I see going on in cultural events, I want to give kudos out to Steppenwolf, because like I say, I have attended several over the past few years, several of their bed nights, and they're usually great for anything that, the problems you may have as far as all the things we've been talking about, as hearing, noise, or whatever, because before they let you know, beforehand they let you know, turn off all your listening devices, recording devices, or whatever, and everybody's usually quiet and very respectful, so you can really enjoy what's going on, the performance or whatever's happening. And then if you want to let off steam, or the people that want to let off steam, well, usually by the time, it's intermission, the noisy people, they shoot out, and you'd be so glad you're sitting there. So actually the auditorium is the quiet place. It becomes a quiet place during intermission. So I don't know if any of you out here that represent Steppenwolf, but I think they do a great job of trying to facilitate for people that have different issues and disabilities where noise and crowds and all that may be a factor. So,
Steppenwolf is in the house, and they heard you.
okay, all right, great job, Steppenwolf.
Appreciate it being made.
For venues like that, my wife and I enjoy going to concerts a lot, and sometimes I forget my little plastic earbuds. And so maybe just having a bowl of those little orange earbuds that people can just grab, pop in.
They had that at Steppenwolf too.
Yeah. Sometimes I don't do my PCCs before I leave the house, and so we forget stuff, and that would be great. And then, like you also said, having something where I can visually see, like a small screen or something just to the side of the stage, where I can visually see like what I'm hearing. I feel bad for my wife because the subtitles are always on the TV. I also don't have hearing aids, but having a low-pitched screaming whine in my ear 24/7 makes things kind of difficult to hear. So that would be fantastic. And also just, like you said, with intermissions, like, have those like scheduled. Because I know you guys always have like the pamphlets and stuff, and it's nice to like see that, like, oh, okay, I'm gonna have a pause here, so that way I can plan. Like you said, like when people are rushing back, that's when I can take my opportunity to go in that like lull. We like being able to plan things out. We like seeing things ahead of time. So having that guide would be very helpful as well.
And do any of you have preferences when it comes to seating in auditoriums or theaters?
Near the door. Seriously, near the door, near the aisle. I joke about it saying, well, I have to sit near the aisle because I'm a long-legged guy and I have to stick my legs out. That's just to cover the fact that I want to be able to bolt if I need to. If I may share a brief story. This is now several years ago. I'd taken the family out to the movies, which mostly I can't hear, go down. But the previews came up for the rather well done Forrest Gump. Remember the movie Forrest Gump? And in the previews, what they had was the scene where Forrest is running through the jungle with his friend Bubba in his arms. And the beautiful surround sound system is giving you the sound effects of the napalm coming in and the bullets breaking the leaves as they go by. And I had no idea that was coming up. We were coming to see something else, and all of a sudden this preview comes on and boom, it's in your face. Well, I spent the rest of the movie in the lobby because just couldn't do that. Don't get me started talking about Saving Private Ryan.
Zachary, did you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, as far as preference, I just choose my seats near the aisle, as close as I can get, and then usually in the back, unless there's a map of the venue online when I'm buying tickets or seeing myself. If there's close exits in the front, I just sit in the front as well, so I can sometimes hear better the acoustics, as I understand and that I've experienced, are better for like the front middle. And so if I'm sitting on an aisle toward the front, usually I can hear a little better. But from my personal experience, for like theater, I've been to a few shows here in the city, and it's been okay. I mean, yeah, the same thing. I just don't go to intermission. I think that's part of the experience for most people, is that they like that hugely crowded feeling, and we're all in this together, and we're seeing this show. We've got 15 minutes to get our booze and M&Ms, and I just don't partake in that. And I do the same thing. Once I'm seeing that most of the seats are full, then I'll just use the restroom and come back. But yeah, in the aisles, toward the rear or the front, if there's emergency access marked on line on that or something.
So have any of you participated in any theater presentations that include captioning? Because more and more theaters in Chicago are doing captioning. Are you aware of that? Is that something you would participate in?
So far, I haven't had the pleasure of participating in the captioning and keep everything going forward. But just to mention about the seating arrangement, that I would prefer in a venue, especially like this crowded, I prefer the front because I'm nosy. I like to hear everything. I don't like to miss nothing. And I don't like to talk. I don't like people to try to tell me what's going on, and people in front. So if I'm sitting in the front, I don't have to deal with nobody whispering and talking and whatever. I have to get that mean look like that, like, come on now, I'm trying to hear. So I prefer the front and during the hours because I do have mobility issues, so it'd be easy for me to come in and out. And what was the question we had there about?
Now, I don't remember because I just had another thought, and something that you probably have all realized already, but it's dawning on me. The last time I was involved in a panel like this, the panelists were all commenting that they prefer to sit all the way in back. They didn't want anyone behind them. They wanted to be able to see everyone in front. So it just goes to show you that veterans are people too, and everybody has their
Oh, yeah,
own
we're a
preferences.
very special population, and that's why I want to provide it. Yeah, we are. We're our own breed of people. Nobody like a vet. And that's why, if you find another vet, man, you can relate to that person, and they can be like 10,000 miles different from you and for what they do or whatever. But when you mention you're a vet, oh, you're my brother, you're my sister, we're a very special population of people. Yeah.
With regard to captioning, some thoughts came up. I experienced captioning at the Lyric Opera of Chicago many years ago. I haven't been back since. That was my first exposure. And then at the Met in New York, I remember I went to Mephistopheles and it was captioned. And this was years, we're talking 15, 20 years ago. So I haven't been to productions lately because I'm busy. And apologies and thank you for everyone who's here representing the performance and creative, expressive artists. Appreciate it very much. I do want to say, though, one thing, I had notes prepared and I wanted to just be extemporaneous. That's why I didn't give you my 2 cents on my perfect world in organizations. But one thing that's very important to me that would be wonderful, I think, if it could be employed more is, it's wonderful, as you had said, Zachary, for people to have options. And it's wonderful, everybody has the preferences. They like the loudness. They just love the adrenaline rush and that type of thing. And there may have been a time in my life when that was okay. But since being discharged from the Marine Corps, it's not. I'm a different person now. And also, I had a heart attack in 2008. That has also affected my cognition. And it may very well have been related to my military service as well, because that was rather traumatic. But that has affected my cognition and some physiological things about me. And I'm a different person now at the age of almost 53. I'm 53, another week. So what really is important to me is for those of us who do seek that quiet space, when things become overwhelming, and they have become overwhelming for me, even at the Shedd Aquarium, because it's such a large organization with so many people from all over the world, not only would that quiet space be something that's really desirable, but a room that is quiet with some type of expressive arts. I work with elders, seniors, and music therapy and expressive arts therapy is so effective, not just for the general population, but for people with dementias, Alzheimer's and other dementias, and memory loss, and trauma survivors. Most of us here are, but maybe several in the audience. Some type of safe space at these large organizations that keep it quite loud. If we can have a place similar to what the Underwater Beauty at Shedd has, that's a little nook off the beaten path, but something where we can, something tactile, something for people who have hearing difficulties, something that feeds their other senses, something expressive, something that feeds their souls, and that's different for everybody. For me, I just love to draw. I love to feel things. I had to touch everything. I broke everything when I was a child growing up. You gave it to me, it was broken. I had to take it apart and see how it worked. But more so than that, I had to feel it and smell it, taste it. I was a troublemaker, very mischievous. So, and I think a lot of us don't lose that childlike zest for life. And we still want to feel it, we still want to be kids. So when it gets overwhelming, as it often does for us, people with, I had a TBI from the Marine Corps. Thank God I'm a functional person today. So, something that can feed my soul away from hustle and bustle, whatever that may be.
But we have another question back here.
Hi again. I'm thinking about the top of the conversation when you were discussing how not being able to find parking can be stressful and how certain elements can induce anxiety and how it's really important to have welcoming staff members. As patrons, before you get to the point of visiting our venue, sometimes when you're on the phone, you are presented with hold music,
or as you're entering our venue, we have ticket zappers. Is that problematic? And if so, how can we better create a soothing environment so that your first step is engaging with us?
Okay, I got to ask you a question. What was that last part you said about receiving before we actually come to the meeting?
Yes, so before you come, sometimes you call us and we may have hold music. Or if you are visiting our venue and as soon as you purchase your tickets, there's a ticket zapper, or sometimes they make sounds, or whatever that process may be. Is there anything problematic about that process, and how can we make that more soothing?
Okay, I don't think that would probably be a big problem, because the initial thing you're trying to do is really accommodate us as far as us being a veteran or having a certain particular need. So pre-arranging something would probably would be that problem for me.
Anybody else would like to answer?
I mean, like, we're used to we're used to the VA being on hold for yeah, hold music is basically our ambient background noise. And as far as like the machines, like the ticket zappers, I've never had like an experience with those. But if I'm at the airport, I'll go to the machine instead of the person. But that varies for veterans. Some veterans prefer people instead of a machine. I just don't want to talk to people. So I'll go to the machine.
Yeah, for I mean, maybe that question stemmed from us talking about music with the hearing aids and things. No, I don't find a problem with that on the phone at all. It's just, you call literally anyone besides a store contact on the phone nowadays, you get a hold of music. So I appreciate the question and the concern for it, but I don't think that's an issue. With parking, I wanted to throw this out too, is that, a simple solution is just, a lot of times people might say like, oh, why don't I take an Uber, or Lyft, or a taxi cab, or public transportation. It's like, those things aren't options for a lot of veterans because they don't trust people through certain experiences in our past, and so a lot of veterans won't get in Ubers, Lyfts, or taxi cabs, and so therein lies the how do we get to the venue. And there was another thing. Oh, the ticket zappers. I have no idea what that is, and unless it's like some type of laser phaser thing you're going to point at me, I think I'm going to be okay. But again, I only speak for myself and veterans. So.
Can we talk about customer service on the telephone? I find it difficult sometimes, not always, but sometimes to understand the customer service of someplace that I've called. Now, the ones that you get, like you're talking about, hi, this is John from ABC Roofing. I don't know you. Why are you calling? I don't care who you are. Especially people new to customer service on the phone, in my experience, have a tendency to try to talk really fast. Let me show you how efficient I am. I'm going to talk really fast because maybe I'm timed by how long I'm on the phone. And that's difficult. Throw in a regional accent and not being able to see the person's lips, because yes, I do still lip read. And it's Charlie Brown's nature. So if I were imparting to you something from my civilian career, one of the things that I did do was teach people to talk on the telephone. And the tip that I got when I was learning how to do it was that you should not speak any faster than you can whisper and make sense. So I whisper really fast, I don't see the words, so let's get it, right? That's too fast. But if you whisper slowly and clearly, it can be understood. So you shouldn't speak any faster than that on the telephone. And customer service folks, they have a tough job. Bless them. But the ones that I find easiest, here I'll give a plug for a positive thing, LLB. When I call them, you always get somebody that I have to ask them, where are you? Well, I'm a name. Well, you wouldn't tell them just to talk to them on the phone. But they slowly, clearly, they take time to listen. Did I understand you to say something that happened the other day that I was dealing with a person who was a veteran, and I laughed and I said, there are some things that we learn how to do really correctly. I read this person a long number, and they were writing it down in front of me. And then he looked at me and he said, I read back for possible correction, which is what we all learn to do on military radios. If you get somebody saying, I'm reading this back for possible correction. Yeah, that's right, because the 7, no, you got that wrong. That's something else. But I read it back for possible correction. Slow, distinct, clear. It makes telephone communication. Back to your point of if you call and you have to get put on hold. Yeah, all right, so I'll put it on speaker. Wait for it to come on. The zapper, no. Although the ones at Wrigley Field are great because they're held by people. And they'll zap their ticket and say, have a good game, we're going to win. I agree with that.
If we have another question.
Hi, thank you for your presentations. I'd like to ask a question about trigger warnings. I'm a writer, and if I'm writing a piece about Vietnam or whatever, and that piece maybe doesn't take place in Vietnam, there may be a scene or two, just about how much data do you need to know? I mean, I can gather that you want to know that there might be explosives, there may be a helicopter sound, but how do I share that without giving away a lot of the story? What works?
Are you talking about trigger alerts in the written word?
No, in play in on a stage.
Oh,
I
so
mean,
you're writing a script for presentation.
Right. So I understand that there, we can put that in a program, but would it be helpful to announce before? But I want people to know before they come into the theater that there might be.
It could be in the advertising, either online or in print. I used to do a lot of theater work before I lost my ability to hear the other actors on stage. But before the curtain would go up, they'd always have a curtain speech. Please silence your phones. If you're going to eat candy, unwrap it now. There would be one break between the first and second acts, and there will be smoke. Or there'll be a simulated gunshot. Don't worry, it's 2 boards clapping together. But as far as, I'd like to know. Someplace, somehow. Curtain speech would be a good place.
Sandy, go ahead.
Yeah, so I've actually thought about this a lot because, for TV shows and things like that, and what used to be on network TV, which I'm not even sure if network TV exists anymore, but they used to have on the show, it would say, the following presentation is, what graphic sexual situations, foul language, or whatever they say. And I think that's great, and I've actually thought in the past, if that had, graphic war scenarios, or and things like that. But I think just that can prepare a person if they're in a physical space or a mental space where they can go and see that or not. I think that much could clear it up without giving away the story by saying, instead of saying there are 2 gunfight scenes, the gunshots are depicted as this, that, and the other thing. I think it's just, an advertisement for it, just the same way that simulated a rape scenario or sexual violence or whatever it would be for other traumas, and that I think would be beneficial.
All right, I agree with both my cohorts wholeheartedly. If there's going to be anything that would be a trigger, or what you consider to be a trigger in your mind, and it's not every day you hear a bomb bursting in there and all that kind of stuff like that. So if a little forewarning would be, especially if you're in an environment where you're dealing with veterans, but and people in general, because there are a lot of civilian population where people have disorders and things going on that would probably trigger them to some type of effect. Children who may have ADHD, or they may be autistic, and certain sounds and smells and different stuff to trigger things in them as well. So I think forewarning, if you're going to do anything out of the ordinary other than speaking, verbally speaking, naturally that it should be forewarning, just like he said, it's gonna be violent, vulgar language, sexual content, anything of that nature. Kind of forewarning would be probably best. You know, even if you do it in the forefront, you say you write articles or things or whatever, you know, put that in the forehand that this book contains, that would be helpful. Because people would have a choice to know whether or not they want to participate.
May I say something very briefly to that? Very, very briefly. I've actually left a performance because there was a very loud sound, and I knew it was coming. There was a trigger warning. So what I'm trying to say is, even with the trigger warning, sometimes our trauma gets kicked in, so it's inevitable. But you know, thank you and do what you can with them. They're appreciated.
And I'll say this too, just to kind of hit on that. It's like one of those things where Stephen King was a really good horror writer because your imagination can take hold of what he's depicting. When I see the trigger warning, my imagination's already running, so if I see it, the cat's out of the bag. So I mean, it's one of those things where rob Peter, pay Paul, and you're telling me I'm going to be exposed to X, but you just told me I'm going to be exposed to X. Now I'm thinking about what X I'm going to be exposed to, and I'm thinking about what X I've gone through already. So it's got to kind of think of it in that scenario as well. If that makes any sense.
We have another question.
I was asked just before the microphone was handed to me, did I have a contribution or questions? Well, no, I don't know, because this is a very rich and very powerful conversation this afternoon, and I'm so grateful to be here. Thank you. Perhaps on the lighter side of things, but nonetheless pragmatic. So I have two questions that I want to go with. So on the lighter side, in theaters and in intermissions, we're hearing from the men on the panel talking about how they can wait till the auditorium starts to fill up. Okay? I would like to know how the women handle that and how venues can accommodate that and how we work with any person with disability or even mobility impairments, because that's a tricky thing in a theater for a woman.
Okay, I'm glad you brought that up. As you mean as far as the intermission, how would you prefer to wait till the crowd comes or go ahead of the crowd or whatever? I'm like this, I'm going ahead of time. I know my physiological body, so I'm going ahead of time. And I'm looking around this crowd, like if it's like a crowd of people, like I said, well, you know, I'm gonna have to cut out of here, you know, I'm already at this time. I'm gonna cut out of here before everybody else, so I'll be at the front end of doing what I have to do, taking care of my business, and then I can miss the crowd out here in the intermission area because I'll be back in, I'm having my business, I'm back in where it's quiet, and I can sit and contemplate on what's coming next, you know, so I prefer to really go to the forefront here, cut out and do what I gotta do, and yeah, exactly.
Could you repeat that question, please? I kind of disassociated thinking about something else, so.
Sorry. So you're at a performance, there's an intermission, the lights go up, and the crowd dashes for the bathroom. The guys in this panel are saying they wait till the crowd returns. As a woman, how do you manage the intermission and that bio break?
Can't answer that until I'm in that situation. But yeah, wow.
So I did have another question to ask all of you, and forgive me, I know that you were introduced and your backgrounds were presented, but have you each had combat experience? And
So that was something we covered at the top. We're not going to be discussing any combat experience at all.
okay, it's not the combat that I want to know about. It's how we would. Can we generalize what you're saying to people who may not have been in combat? That's my concern.
I think in life has us a lot of life. You know, you're born and then you just got to deal with a lot. So I think a person that hasn't served or been in any type of military situation still can experience traumatic events, you know, in a civilian setting just as well. So, I mean, it's not limited to you know, you made a choice. Most of us, some of us maybe, I don't know, besides maybe Dad, a lot of us probably just, you know, we volunteered to go into the military. I don't know if you were back in the job days or not, but we made a choice. So sometimes in life those things where you don't have a choice and you have to deal with a situation and it may be traumatic and it may be life affecting and life changing. So the choice of military service is just a choice. It's like everyone has a choice. So it's a choice that we made, and some of the situations that came out of the choice we have to deal with for the rest of our lives, just like people in ordinary life have to deal with. You know, bad marriage, cheating boyfriend, anything, you know. So, you know, it's just like, yeah, that too, you know.
Zachary, did you want to answer?
Yeah, so, one more time with the question, it'll come back. Sorry.
The
Oh, yeah,
question
yeah,
about was because we generalized.
Yeah, I'm sorry. So I was in the Marine Corps, and in the Marine Corps, it's every Marine a rifleman. And so everyone trains for combat as an infantry rifleman, and I was in the infantry. And when you train, even without going to combat, you train for combat, in combat scenarios. And honestly, a lot of my injuries came from training in combat scenarios. And so I think that regardless of if I ever went to combat or not, I would still have some of these associations with the noise and things. I think that would be relevant. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, for instance, one of my first times to Chicago, not from the area, was after my first deployment, and we were down here by the water, and I don't remember what holiday it was. It was in the springtime. And I was getting out of my truck with some family members, and this explosion went off, and I jumped back in the truck. And I'm 2 weeks out of my deployment, and I jumped back in the truck, and like my whole world stopped. And my cousin looks at me, he's like, "What's going on?" I'm like, that sounded just like a 155 going off, which is a large artillery projectile, also used as an improvised explosive device. And he goes, "I meant to tell you, I can't remember what holiday is in the spring, whatever," but he goes, "Chicago shoots 155s over the water this holiday." I'm like, that's exactly what it was. So I mean, like, I think that if I was in combat or not, that certain scenario would impact me the exact same way.
That's, I think, yes, like a lot of non-combat guys, like you're saying, I was in the Army infantry, like, we're all trained for that, for combat. And all of my friends, I'm the only one who's actually been to combat, all my veteran friends, and they still have a lot of the same quirks and tendencies that I do. And so yes, I think that these can be applicable, kind of almost blanketed, but you're saying each veteran is different, we're people. You know, but I think that's a really good question. I think that yes, a lot of these things, like you're saying, I think that's fun. Like, I was injured more in training than I was when I was deployed, you know. And yeah, definitely these are more applicable to, these are applicable to both, for sure. That's a really good question. Thank you.
My question comes from Zachary's comment earlier about veterans' sort of distrust of ride-sharing programs and taxis because you don't know the person that you're riding with. And I work at Sepwolf and events and actually run the Veterans Night program, so thank you for playing that one. And so thank you all for being here. This has been really insightful for me in regards to that program and many of our events that we do. But my question would be, and I know that we do a lot of like post-show surveys. I don't know if we collect information about whether or not in terms of our demographics, whether or not you're a veteran or not. But I'd be curious to know your thoughts on like valet services for parking, and if that's a service that you do think that veterans are interested in utilizing, just because you did speak on earlier a little bit about the distress. So.
Yeah. Well, you brought up a good subject. That's what you call a double-edged sword. You have the veterans like probably me and a lot of my comrades or whatever, fellow veterans, they feel like this. We're not trusting nobody. We had a big trust issue. It's kind of hard to trust people, especially with your personal belongings, like your space, you're invading on my space. And then you have the other type of veterans that probably feel like they're entitled and they deserve it. So it's like I said, a double-edged sword. So you're probably going to get a mixed amount of emotions about that. But some people like to be catered to and others like to handle their own business, so it just depends. But it is a good service because it's particularly helpful for those people with disabilities that probably wouldn't be able to, like, I know I'd be stubborn, you know, and I had to go all the way up to the 3rd or 4th floor and park because there wasn't any more handicapped park. I'm probably like, valet! But other than that, normally if I got me a spot over handicap, I'm good. I'm fine, thank you, you know, and I'll go on and take care of my thing. So that's kind of mixed, but it is a good amenity for a person that really would need it. But you know, it's personal preference, I believe.
So, yeah, that's a great question. And it's not, I want to make sure you know that it's not like veterans like just have this huge like arm out against everyone, but it's just a matter of dealing with people in certain scenarios and bring up a lot of things. I think a valet service would be fantastic. I'm on the reserve side, so I wouldn't ask for anything like that. And it's hard for me to like talk to you guys about this because I don't want to ask for a lot of accommodations and things. But I think that it could be completely feasible to offer valet accommodations for individuals who request, in advance. And I'll say this too, a lot of veterans don't do things spur of the moment, And so we research, we know what time we're gonna leave, traffic, where we're going, traffic when we're leaving. We have things planned out even before to make sure we try to conquer all these little tiny scenarios that might pop up due to situations that come. And so, in saying that, I'm saying that I think it's feasible to expect the veteran not to just show up and say valet, but to have something on the website or some type of advertisement stating that persons with whatever have a valet option should they need it for mobility issues or whatever the case is. I think that's great.
Go ahead. I have another question too. Can I ask real quickly? Speaking of the website again, something I brought up earlier, where should this information for veterans be?
Planning your visit.
Yeah, I think that's great. Planning your visit, I always check that out. I don't always check out persons with disabilities. I have lately because I have become a person with disabilities since December. In the visual sense, if you will. But I think that putting it in those two sections for sure would be great.
My name is Art, and I'm recreation manager with the Forest Reserves of Cook County. And I noticed that all of the veterans talked about noise being an issue, crowds and so forth. So I would like to offer the Forest Reserves as an alternative. Because we're all about quiet, and we never have music playing, and so, and actually we go back and forth with, some people say, oh, we should have music at this event, and we're always like, no, nature is our music, so we have been really really trying to reach out to veterans and other diverse communities, so I would like to know what is the best way to reach out to you, to offer up programs, because we're wide open and we offer programming year-round. We try to remove as many barriers as we can, you know, for people to experience nature in different ways. We have 2 gear libraries, meaning that we have inventories of kayaks for one of our programs, where we will teach you how to kayak, you know, take you out on excursions and we have all the equipment, as well as camping gear. We have camping gear that we lend out, train you on it, you bring your group back and you have an experience. So how can we reach out to you to offer these type of experiences?
Okay, hello, Mr. Art, nice meeting you. You touched on something near and dear to my heart when you said Forest Preserve. As a child growing up in the city of Chicago, that was some of our favorite places to go for family reunions, the Forest Preserve, the Aaron Woods in particular, the Southsider. And we always had great times there, and it is a peaceful place. I'm an outdoor person, so I love being around nature and quiet and tranquility. It's very peaceful. I'm glad to meet you, and I'm glad you came to this, so I can connect, and you connected me. I live in a veteran community with nothing but veterans, and I'm quite sure that some of my fellow veterans and neighbors would love to be a part of some of your programs at the Forest Preserve. So we can see each other before we leave today.
Okay.
Give me your information, and I can hook you up where you probably can go to presentation in front of a whole room full of nothing but veterans.
That'd be great.
All right, thank you, sir.
So, one of the best ways is to find out what the local veteran hospitals are in this area. So Hines or the Great Lakes Veteran Hospital up there. And if you get in touch with them, they're connected to pretty much every veteran group, and they'll just disseminate that information.
Yeah.
And that's honestly one of the best ways. That's how I found out about the first panel I did, was through my hospital, Hines Hospital. I found out through there, and honestly, you can probably set up events, because in the military we used to do, marriage retreats and stuff like that, and you go out and you have these organized events, and that would be a great way for both the hospital and the veterans and you guys. You organize a group of people with their spouses to go out there and do those fun activities, and that's a really great idea.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
it really is.
Yeah, so I think the best way to do that is to, I think personally, three organizations is the military hospitals in that area, and then the VFW and the, what's the other one?
American Legion.
American Legion, right. So they're tied into smaller programs like ASAP and just other places that can put the word out, but I think the best thing is just to get on somebody's emailing list and to push that information out, if even not for everything that you offer, just to remind people that it's there. Yeah, again, thanks. I'm a huge proponent of state and national parks, and has no personal getaway, even though sometimes it feels like I'm working again.
Yeah, I got your bug, Mr. Art. I know a lot of veterans organizations. We can hook you up. That's why I said that.
Are there any other questions?
May I comment?
Sure, yes.
I don't know how private/public the information is. I, for one, have a driver's license that has a veteran on it. And you might have access to that database out of Jesse White's office. And for those who renew their driver's license and or license tags by email, they probably have an email address as well.
Who had the question over here? Okay, we have 2. Okay.
Hello, I'm also with the Joffrey Ballet, but mine's not specific to our organization. But in general, how do you feel about veteran discounts? And what are you looking for when you're maybe looking at different organizations that offer them, as far as what the discount allows, as far as number of people, or having to pick those tickets up at will call it, or having to pick them up in person, and showing some sort of identification? How do you kind of feel about how discounts work?
That's something that we talked about before, and a lot of museums have, free entry for active duty veterans. But when I was active duty, I went to the museum once when I was on leave. I was never able to do that. If you have a free admission for a veteran, like you said, most veterans can prove that they're veteran. If you have free admission for a veteran, they'll gladly pay for their spouse or their kids to go. So, whatever add-ons, so, so like the Few Museum, if you have free general admission for a veteran, and then, they have to pay for the extra things, they'll do that. They'll do that gladly, as long as they get that free entry, and they'll pay for their family members as well. At least in my opinion, I don't mind paying for my wife if I'm free. And that's an incentive also for other veterans to be like, hey, I'm going to bring my family. As long as one person out of the 5 is free, that's not really a big hit for you guys, I don't think. I don't know, I'm not an accountant, so English major.
We as veterans, yes, we'll take all the little kudos we can get because we don't get a whole lot. So discount, free admissions to certain things would be greatly appreciated, and you would be probably overwhelmed to see the amount of veterans that would come out to woodwork and want to participate in that. And I can probably hook you guys up with information for a lot of different veteran organizations where you can outreach to find those people if you're thinking about going down that course.
Until recently, I mostly never got involved with the idea of a veteran's discount. I think it's from that 50 years ago thing of button it up and put it away. But until the state of Illinois gave me the driver's license that says veteran on it, I would not have had anything on my person where I would be able to prove to you that I was a veteran. So I wouldn't step up and ask for the veteran's discount unless somebody say, well, let me see your DD 214. Or let me see your, and I wouldn't have it, and then, I'm not going to ask and then get rebuffed. I'll tell you a brief story. I went with one of my daughters. We were in New York State, and she said, Dad, don't you want to go to the Baseball Hall of Fame? Well, yeah. What's the trade-off? Well, we have to go shopping the next day. Okay. So we went to the Hall of Fame, and we're standing in the lobby. And anybody's been to Cooperstown? As you noticed, the price of admission, there's a whole billboard with the different categories and prices and discounts. And I'm standing there looking at it, and here's my kid. And she's saying off into the distance, the clerk is over here, she's saying off in the distance, gee, Dad, do you suppose they would give a discount to you because you were a Vietnam combat veteran? And fortunately for us, the clerk at the counter said, why, of course, please step over here so we can so I don't know if that addresses, I don't know. Sure, if it isn't a big deal. If it isn't a big deal.
May I say something too?
Sure.
Find out the beats. I'm going to pick one. This is actually going to be probably the most important thing I want to share that would make a place more welcoming and more inviting, any place. Discounts are wonderful. I don't think anybody doesn't appreciate them. It's nice, it's a wonderful gesture, I appreciate them, I use them. I think they're great. How about the, veterans, on Veterans Day, we get that free meal over at Chili's. There's so many places that do that. That free cup of coffee at Starbucks. I'm there. Free food, I'm there. But the most important thing I want to say as a female veteran, from my perspective, you and I were talking earlier. You're with me on this. I'm going to share a very brief thing. Boot camp. The week before we graduated boot camp, the drill instructors gave us a little talk. This is at Paris Island in South Carolina in the late 80s. And remember it like it was yesterday. Part of the Let's Go team when you graduate and get out in service, this is what you're going to encounter, and this is who can help you with whatever problem that you encounter, is be careful of the sexual predators in the service. And if you have a problem, go to your CO. report it, there is help, here's the number where you can, And, that stuck with me. I'm like, oh gosh, this is supposed to be a joyous occasion boot camp, and here we're being warned about sexual predators. So, and it was a problem then, it's a problem now. Thank God there are a lot of people trying to do something about it. It's a different experience for a female to be in the military than our male counterparts. We are rather powerless. But let me tell you something. Since I've been discharged, what's been more important to me than anything is entering a place feeling safe and not threatened. And if I can impart anything to the people here, to everybody here, or anybody who's going to listen to this when we're finished, is make it a safe, warm, welcoming environment from the moment we walk through those doors. And whatever you need to do, please put your heads together and do it. Do we find that in many places? Sure. Can we do better? Sure. It's wonderful that we're here, because the CCAC is attempting to do that, and I couldn't appreciate Lynn and her staff more right now. I just can't believe that you're doing this, and I'm so grateful that we're here. So we're part of this process. But what we have lost track of, I think, is human kindness, human welcoming, human compassion. And in the zest to be maybe the most cutting edge, doing this, that, and the other in our organizations, we need to get back to the basics. Be kind, respectful. Remember that there are women, not just veterans, but women who may be feeling threatened from just walking right through that door. And we can extrapolate what I'm saying about a veteran to anyone. This applies to humanity. So let's get back to being kind. And I just love to be welcomed and feel like I'm in a safe place. Some organizations, I don't feel that way. And they're in the city, and they're large, very large organizations and cultural organizations that have a lot to offer in the way of education and interactive programming and cutting edge. But sometimes I walk through the door and I don't feel safe. It's just too loud. It's immediately loud when I go through the door. I want to have the option to not have loudness smacked in my face. Or if the staff is not welcoming me in a non-threatening way right off the bat, I notice that. I still enjoy myself, but it's not the same. So that's just what I wanted to do.
Thank you for that. I think we had one more question.
Can I answer a question that wasn't asked?
Sure.
I'll toss this out semi-rhetorically to your organizations. Why do you want to attract veterans? Now, I appreciate that you all are here trying to figure out how do you lower the barriers to veterans using your facility, coming to your facility. My question to you is, has anybody asked why do you want veterans to come? Now, I've been doing this interrelating with the public for a bunch of years now. Thank goodness I've gotten used to speaking. But some organizations, some places only want veterans to come in, and you're talking about the veterans discount, but they put a sticker on their veterans discount. Well, why do you give a veterans discount? Well, because then they're going to come in and they'll bring a family member and they'll all spend money. Okay, so it's a marketing thing to get more people to cross the door. It's like free meals for kids. Okay, well that means the adults have to bring them, they have to spend money. So I would say there's a question to ask yourself, why do we want to attract veterans? Is it marketing? Is it part of the business plan? It's how you generate bottom line. You have to generate bottom line, otherwise you can't say, oh, I get that. But why veterans? I'm not sure I have your answer. Is it because we want to feel like we're waving the red, white, and blue? You understand, I came from the generation where people didn't care if you were a veteran. If you submitted a resume for a job and you listed, I was in charge of 197 men with a $15 million equipment budget. That's fantastic. Tell me about that. Well, I was an Armored Cavalry Troop Commander in Vietnam. Doesn't count. That's just Army. That doesn't count. So now we're the other way. So I would ask you, if you're saying to yourself, why are we trying to attract veterans? Is it altruistic? Is it for the bottom line? And then drive your actions toward what your purpose is. But if it's just, we're trying to attract veterans because we want to have some guys walking around in the black ball caps and look how cool we are, nah, keep it. Don't need to do it. Go ahead, Dana.
If you're done.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, that actually reminded me, this was something specifically told to me by 2 different individuals I talked to in preparation for this panel, was, and I'm not saying any organization out here in the audience, hopefully coming to an event like this would know better, but don't do what we call pet event. Pet event. There it is. So, more laughter. Cheers. I'm sorry. So I have had 2 different individuals in the past, good friends of mine, who were invited to, hey, come behind the scenes, see how it works. We're going to bring you and some other veterans and show our appreciation for you and X, Y, and Z, and you're going to have a full day with bring your whole family. And they get there, and there's news, and there's media, and look how good our organization is, and that feels real bad. And I've got a lot of head shaking in the audience, so hopefully that's understood. But you immediately lose that person and their circle of friends, and their circle of friends are no longer going to go to that organization. And it doesn't look good. I'm sure that's the same as any situation of demographic you're trying to cater to by doing something like that, but they're, especially with the wars being unpopular, but troop support is popular, like we talked about, support the warrior, not the war, if that's what you want, a lot of, it's just come to experience that some organizations show they support the warrior by showing they support the warrior with news and articles, and that's just not appreciated, but and on the other hand, though, veterans do have that small, tight community like we had talked about where, hey, I'm a veteran, okay, me too, we're immediately friends. Where if an organization does reach out to the VFW or the other organization I can never remember because my brain doesn't work. But if you do things like that where you bring a group of veterans and their families behind the scenes and show them, like to be honest, the ballet, that'd be incredible. Fantastic. And I know it might be hard on you, but veterans are going to talk to that as any other demographic, to their other people in their demographic, and their people are going to talk about it as well. And it's going to increase respect towards that organization and that, in this case, the cultural center that they do go to, and it's going to increase, attendance from that population as well. So I think that can go both ways, and on the right way can be very impactful if that's what your goal is, to reach out and show veterans that you are accommodating to veterans and you care about their support and you care about their, and I'm not saying care about their support as in make sure they know you care about them, but telling them that we care that you're patrons of our events too, we want you to be in this crowd. That's also very important.
Can I say, since I was Debbie Downer, I should have a positive. Not long ago, Chicago Symphony Orchestra contacted a veterans organization I'm affiliated with and invited us to rehearsal. So we got to go and sit in the audience of rehearsal for several hours. And every time they would pause, they have to rearrange the chairs and drain the spit valves on the brass instruments and that kind of stuff. Somebody from the orchestra would come out and sit with us and explain what's going on. This is why we're doing that, and this is the piece that's coming up with this, and then you hear that, and thank you for the service, which is always an awkward thing to answer. You're welcome. Do you know what you're saying? But I should give a plug to the CSO, that, like you were talking about the backstage, we got to come for rehearsal, which no, it's not the whole full-blown symphony, but you got to listen several hours to some of the most beautiful music in the world by the world's most talented musicians, and then they would come out and chat with you. I'm not in the next set, so is it okay if I sit here with you and we talk about what's happening? Yes. That's okay. Thanks.
Okay, I think we have time for that one last question.
Hi, thank you.
So I work at Garfield Park Conservatory, which sometimes is really quiet and great as far as the sound, but other times it can be very loud. There's school groups, there's a lot going on. So as far as planning your visit, we could share that information on when it is quieter, like Mondays, no school groups come. But what's the best way to get that information out? I mean, we could go to the different groups and say this is when it is, but when you plan your visit to a museum, I know if you're going to a show, it's different. It's like a 2-hour experience, but when you go to a museum, how do you choose when to go, and how do you find that information of when it would be best to visit as far as noise?
Okay, this is going to answer your question, most of you out there. Some of the best ways I think for you all to get recognition and get the word out is same thing we've been saying already. The local Veterans Hospital, Jesse Brown, Hines VA, they have great volunteer programs called Strike Force, where they disseminate any kind of information that you want put out. So that would probably be the first good step. And organizations that deal with other organizations, like I said, I'm a member of several veteran organizations, so I will be happy to leave my contact number, and if you guys get your flyers or whatever together or whatever, I can probably set you up to come and to the veteran facility where you can disseminate a lot of your information, and and go on from there. So it's relatively easy. Just, if you don't know, then I'll let you know. You guys can get it out to the VA hospitals. They'll gladly put it out.
Yeah, just touch on it again on the website. If you have a plan your visit, spot on the website just to include what days are less hectic maybe, but honestly, for myself, Google Reviews has peak hours of business, and it has a lot of times days that are more frequented than others as well as hours. So. Yep.
Maybe the homepage of, for now till the word gets out, the homepage of your website, you could have something on there as well. And included on any specific marketing materials itself for the event itself. So that is just 2 cents, which I'm sure everybody saw it. Yeah.
But if I'm listening to you correctly, are you specifically talking about veterans? That's what I was addressing as far as particularly the veteran population. You want to involve them as well, because I'll suggest that we have that's the best way to get anybody to come to your facility. But if you particularly want to target veterans, I think a veteran organization would be more intact, because, like I said, a lot of veterans, they don't really participate in a lot of stuff because of different reasons, but they have to deal with Jesse Brown and Hines VA and the other organizations, because that's their network. That's how they operate and get all their information or whatever they need. So they're more likely to go link toward them than they would just go on a particular website trying to see what's happening. They want to see what does this offer for veterans.
Something just popped into my mind that I think may be relevant. Sorry, I'll be extremely brief so everyone can speak. Something just popped into my mind about that I think is relevant. I had an experience recently. Someone reached out to me about a program and how to get the word out to people in skilled nursing facilities, which is where I work. And this ties right back in full circle to the human contact kindness thing. I think this is really very important. It's wonderful to have all that information out there so that we can look at it. It's wonderful to even have a veteran organization speak to you, to be the liaison, and get the word right back, be a representative and get the word back to our peeps, so to speak, right? But my recommendation is, and this is what we're going to do with this particular individual, he has a wonderful program that is combining high school students with the seniors, because both generations feel unheard, have so much to say, and they feel forgotten, and they feel dismissed. And going into actually go outreach. I'm not saying people here aren't doing outreach, you're here. I mean, go to the veterans themselves. If, Muhammad won't go to the mountain with Mom will go to Muhammad, Muhammad will go to the mountain, whatever that saying is.
Yeah.
So, go and they will come. But there's a human voice to everything.
Yes.
We get lost, I think, in technology, and it's wonderful. It's a double-edged sword. It overwhelms me at times, yet I need it. I need it to get places that, we have to know where we're going. I don't get in a car, I map it. I used to teach mapping skills in the Marine Corps to commission men, amongst my other responsibilities with my specialty. I want to know where I'm going, when I'm going to get there, have plan B, C, D, E, F, because it's a dangerous world, and nobody's going to do it for me. If you want to get a job done, you do it yourself, right? So we need to go out to people and reconnect with people one-on-one. I think that's what I'm all about. I want to, that one-on-one speaks volumes to me. And yes, we do need technology to get the word out, but all the technology in the world won't make up for that one-on-one connection that we don't have with people. That's what it really comes down to.
I think that is the perfect way to end. We're just after 5 o'clock. I would like to thank all of you on the panel for being here. I think we can all agree.
Fade to black. White text on black background. Welcoming Veterans. Presented by Chicago Cultural Accessibility Consortium. For workshop resources and more information, visit chicagoculturalaccess.org. Presenting speakers. Moderator, Lynn Walsh. Panelists, Zachary Burgart, Martin Davis, Connie Karras, Ned Ricks, and Valerie Watts. Workshop Accessibility. Kathy Raycan, Real-Time Captioning. Video editing, captioning, and audio description by BridgetMelton.com. Video fades to black.